This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge & Company. Can we, in 2012, still count on the young to get up in the morning in time to vote? If the students are part of the Roosevelt Institute Campus Network, the answer is easy. Not only will they vote, but they will help to frame the policies that will drive that election. 6 years ago, Hilary Doe helped found and lead the chapter at the University of Michigan. Now she's the national director of the Campus Network, the country's first and only student think tank and a major hope for a future. And she's my guest today, and welcome.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks
so
for having
nice
me.
to have you.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I happened on this website and read about this program, and I was thrilled.
Yeah.
It is an astonishing program. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we started, I'm astonished too every day. So we started after the 2004 election, actually. You know, as you can imagine, a lot of young people across the country were frustrated by the outcome of the election, wanted to do more work, and really were frustrated that traditionally we've only asked young people to engage in politics by registering voters and, you know, knocking doors. Important things, but not the only things that we could do. And we really wanted to create a way to insert our ideas into the process. So we started student think tanks, as you said, at a few campuses at first. I started one in 2005, soon after the launch of the organization with some other folks. And soon it took off. You know, we grew. We're at 125 campuses nationwide, about 10,000 members. And we created a model of policy change where we asked students to go out into their communities, identify local challenges from, you know, sort of homelessness to mitigating climate change to health outcomes, education, whatever the case may be, and then really design solutions with the community to solve those challenges. And they're getting really good at it. So they're implementing things locally, at the state level, even nationally. One of our students actually wrote a piece of the healthcare reform legislation that was implemented by Obama. So we've just been seeing this movement of young people who really want to be engaged in politics in a really deep, substantive way, and for the long term, not just for an election cycle.
So you're developing leaders, the leaders of now, basically. As soon as they graduate, they can become leaders and run for office and really participate in all different kinds of government and everything else.
Yeah.
You have what do you call them?
Policy centers, yeah.
Policy centers. What does that mean?
So it basically allows us to create resources for students who are trying to write policy on a host of issues. So we have energy and the environment, education, healthcare, defense and diplomacy, economic development. It spans the gamut, but it allows us to have those students who are really experts in their field. They've been doing this for years, mentor other students, provide resources to students across the country who are building program, and help us to implement them so we can work with partner organizations and, you know, sort of shop our solutions around to get them implemented.
So this is an organization that really grew from the ground up.
Yep, I promise you. You know, I was in one of the dorm rooms that was trying to get it started. We kept our receipts in shoe boxes. You know, it was a youth-driven initiative, which is really novel.
Yeah.
Most youth organizations are started by sort of parent organizations that want a youth arm. And this was really driven by young people and is still owned by young people. Our board, we have a student board of advisors that sort of helps dictate our programming. And that keeps us relevant every year. So we've seen steady growth in membership, not a lot of volatility like a lot of youth orgs.
So how did you get involved with the Roosevelt Institute?
So, you know, we're using the Roosevelt name from the beginning, actually.
Oh, you just decided to do
Yeah,
that.
because students at Stanford helped start it, and the Hoover Institute was at Stanford.
I see.
And they looked up and felt like, what is a good response to this? And created the Roosevelt Institute.
That's great.
Yeah, so we reached out to Anna Roosevelt, who's FDR's granddaughter, and asked her if it was okay that we use the name. And she connected us to the Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt Institute, which is the nonprofit partner to the library. So we merged in 2008, and they started a think tank soon after with Joe Stiglitz and Rob Johnson have been doing incredible work around financial reform and other things. And now I really feel like we have it set up so that we are rooted in the legacy and the progressive and inspiring legacy of FDR and Eleanor. And we also have students, generating leadership across the country to really change the country over the next 30 years, while we're also affecting policy debates today with some of the biggest thinkers.
It's so exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really almost, it's very exciting. I'm thrilled about it.
Yeah.
And it is so important, and especially lately in elections, because so much attention is to fundraising.
Yeah.
And then the field operation is, as you said, it's finding people and doing that, and you never really have an impact on the thing.
Right.
So this is really going under it and then coming up.
Yep. And non-conservatives, I think, make this mistake of really organizing only around elections and not making a lot of investments in infrastructure. And by that I mean, sort of leadership development, sort of controlling the narrative, talking about our values, talking about our vision, so that between now and, when all of us millennials are entering the Social Security rolls, this country's having a different conversation. We're not just fighting against this or that, piece of policy, but, we're just having a fundamentally different conversation.
When you started your chapter, was it hard to find people to join you?
No, not at all. I mean, we started with maybe 10, and then you pull off a couple really incredible things. We did some work in Detroit, we did work in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and when you see your policy implemented and a block change, at my hometown, I'm from Detroit area, and we implemented a piece of policy, and when you can see, people coming back, there's hustle and bustle on that block, there's, interest in development, that's powerful. That commits you to a movement.
Explain a project.
Yeah. So, well, there have been a lot of them. Yeah. One that's really exciting recently.
Excuse me.
No, it's fine. One that's really exciting recently. Students in New Haven at our Yale chapter recognized that New Haven public schools were really having a hard time, and similarly that students that graduated from them just couldn't afford to go to college. My generation has unprecedented student loan debt. It's crushing, really. And so they worked with the city government to design a program they called the New Haven Promise. And they just implemented it so that any student that goes K through 12 in New Haven public schools gets a full ride to any Connecticut state public university.
How exciting.
Yeah, it's through an endowment, government investment, sort of a revolving loan fund. And they did this by doing community work.
So how did you do this? Explain it. How did you do it?
So we have a model of change called Think Impact. We've developed it from best practices across the country over the last few years. And essentially we train all of our students to do this work. We have field teams of about 40 people across the country who help do the trainings and get people on the ground. And we teach them to kind of go out into the community, do volunteer work, meet people, interview people, try and get rooted in the place where you are and figure out what the challenges are, what the points of entry are. Then we teach people to, sort of write a piece of policy to solve that. We have this team of policy strategists that help them figure out what a good piece of policy would be. They generate it, they produce it, and then our communications team promotes it, hooks them up with the right partner organizations, and really tries to create a campaign around it. So they're still knocking doors at the end of the day, but they're doing it around their own ideas, and really creating solutions, like I said, from the local to the national, to this budget debate that's been happening that our students really are creating a huge impact on.
Have you created your own budget?
We have. So, in addition to all...
With the help of your scholars?
In part. We have all this great local work happening across the country, but what really was riling people up in the last couple years was this, when the president launched his deficit commission, there's this conversation where the narrative is, we're going to cut Social Security, we're doing it for our grandchildren. Young people want us to cut this or that, or we're stealing from them. And our network felt, I'm your grandchild, and that's not what I think at all. So we really need to insert our voice in the process. I mean, it just became clear that these decisions are wide sweeping. And if we don't have a voice in the process, we'll inherit whatever our leaders in power come up with today. So we launched a project called Think 2040. And we did conversations across the country with about 3,000 plus young people, asking them what they wanted America to look like in 2040. Sort of what values, just dream big, sort of what do you want it to look like? And they created a really incredible vision. I'm talking, rethinking what the social safety net is, expanding it, and creating a student benefit extension, including in it worker retraining, including in it universal pre-K, universal health care, thinking through what that looks like, really changing how we think about defense and foreign aid, including alternative energy in our defense plan, and even taxes. They put a light on inequality and said, look at the country. They created a tax system that makes that much more apparent and starts to mitigate it. So they made huge sweeping changes in this vision. And of course, the response we got when we released it was mostly positive, but some people said, oh, young people, like, you know, they're so idealistic. Of course but you just can't do it. We have all these financial constraints. So we organized the same 3,000 people to create a budget for the Millennial America, which we then had scored in the same way that the CBO scores their budget to prove that you can make all those investments and
still have a budget.
Yep, and over time we were able to make the deficit reduction that we needed to make. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. We released it. It got a lot of press, and I think most importantly was an optimistic vision for what we can be doing that people will really rally around, and that's rooted in values.
That you really can do something and make a difference.
Yeah, and that 3,000 people can agree on something.
Yes, that's incredible.
It's
so
wonderful.
What is the connection then into the elected officials that need to be affected?
Yep.
How do you do that?
Yep. So on the local level, certainly all of our students have those connections.
Right.
You know, city councils are now calling our chapters and saying, you know, no one's dealing with this issue. Could you guys work on it? So that's a wonderful relationship. And then on the national level, we're part of different organizations. You know, so we're on the White House's youth engagement table, so we're talking to them pretty frequently. We've been asked to testify recently to the super committee, to, you know, other folks who want to engage this generation. I think everyone knows, you know, we're the largest generation in American history, larger than the boomers. And
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and so we're important. You know, by 2016, we're 33% of the citizen-eligible electorate. So I think people recognize that on these issues, you just have to start engaging young people if you're going to win elections, because they're civically engaged. They're, you know, if they vote in the same kind of levels they've been voting in, they're powerful. So reaching out to elected officials isn't that difficult. They want to know. They want to hear us.
It is fabulous because this has only been happening for how many years?
You have 6. I guess it's our 6th birthday in December.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So is the central office in New York or in Washington or what?
It's in New York. We have a Washington office as well. We were in DC, but our students felt like, you know, most of what we do is local, and a lot of what's being talked about in DC isn't even relevant to the work that we're doing. So we really wanted to have a presence outside of DC
That's
as well.
an interesting perception because DC is so removed from what's happening on the streets that it's incredible.
Yeah, and it's important for us to be there sometimes, but it's also important, I think, for, you know, our field staff and those 40 staff across the country to have a home base.
What kind of a budget do you have? Where do you get this money?
So foundations, you know, national foundations have been really supportive. We also, of course, do regional-based fundraising across the country that a lot of organizations can't do because we have these chapters nationwide that are doing local work, and some individual contributions. But, you know, like everybody else, we're just out pounding the pavement for funding.
Now, will your members then evolve and contribute into the presidential election?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of talk about whether young people will come out and vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And that young people are apathetic and they don't care, and they're not,
totally,
or they're turned off, they're angry, they're not going to support.
Right. And I think that the key, I think they will come out and vote. I think the key is what we do between now and then, and how we treat young people, essentially, sort of how we talk about them and try to engage them. So I'm not just talking about social media, which a lot of people like to say, oh, you just need to tweet and then young people will come out and vote. I don't think that's true. But we are a community-minded generation. We are, you know, did grow up in a technology age where you don't just sort of read a static web page, you get to, you know, vote and comment. And I think that extends to the way we want to be governed. We don't want to just pick between 2 options in governance, but we sort of want to be able to control the agenda, help write that agenda, really have a deep stake in ownership. I think the irony is that people think we're apathetic when in reality we want to do more than we're allowed to do, and that is not, you know, turns us off.
I mean, young people generally.
Yeah. This generation. I mean, part of what's been so incredible about this job is, you know, to spend the last few years traveling the country and talking to young people and seeing what we all have in common and, you know, what we don't. And there are a lot of, you know, experiences we've had that are fundamental. Like living through 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, this recession has really made, I think, this generation very socially empathetic, very civically minded. We understand the value of being able to lean on each other, of this safety net that, you know, the vision for the America that we created really, you know, underscores. And we want to be deeply involved in politics, including in 2012, for a progressive candidate. But I just think that it sort of needs to be a deep kind of engagement, the kind that it was in 2008 in the run-up to the election, and not the kind that we've seen during governance over the last few years.
Did you? I mean, you came from a family of teachers, parents of teachers, and they were always interested.
Well, they were union members. That was my exposure to politics, basically. You know, they were a strong union family. They weren't necessarily, you know, deeply engaged, but you know, I saw what was happening in Detroit when I was growing up, and the city just really changing. And now I'm happy to say I'm seeing a lot of my friends moving home to Detroit and really investing in it and doing things that are socially entrepreneurial and artistic and interesting. But sort of seeing that happen made me realize the power of policy, that a lot of this can be affected really with government money and with innovative ideas and with, you know, energy, yeah.
I'm so overwhelmed by this because, you know, I took civics in junior high school, and I don't think civics is taught anymore.
No, not really.
And it's too bad because I was great loss. But I had a wonderful teacher, and he then formed a chapter of something called Youth Builders, which was an organization Eleanor Roosevelt formed. And we almost, I mean, it wasn't as sophisticated or as much, but it really brought us into the community and into the politics of what was going on, and it had an everlasting effect on me. So I look back to that as one of these things, and it's such a loss that we can't engage people and make them see the result of their engagement. Isn't that the most satisfying thing?
Yep, certainly. Sort of helping people create an impact right now commits them, I think, for the long term, and that's when we need them for. We don't just need folks to turn out. I don't even like talking about that with young people. We don't need them to just turn out in 2012, right? And then sort of hibernate in their dorm room for 2 years. What we need are an engaged citizenry that's going to be committed to this movement over the course of the next 30 years, so that by 2040, like I said, we're having a different conversation and we're living in a different sort of climate. And I really think that that's what Roosevelt is graduating. In fact, we just started a new network for our alums and other young professionals, because in the run-up to 2012, there are a lot of organizations organizing college students, but folks in their 20s and 30s are sort of in this weird limbo. You know, they've graduated, moved to a new city, don't have a ton of community. It's unclear how they can be powerful. And we're not the Kiwanis generation, so we're not joining, you know, Kiwanis, and unfortunately not being unionized at high rates like we used to be. So I think it's important to create sort of civic structure for those individuals to help them be powerful. So we launched a network called Roosevelt Pipeline, and it's in 11 cities across the country now since the June launch, which we're pretty excited about. And we're convening them all in New York City in November, on November 7th. So the community's welcome to come out here in New York. And we really hope that they'll have this deep engagement locally, that they'll become local community leaders. We're training them, we're connecting them to local boards, to city councils, and in fact that some of them will want to be the people that change the conversation. So we just picked a class of Pipeline Fellows, 15 young people who have something important to say that isn't being said in this current media debates, and who are diverse and reflective of the generation, not, you know, of a different generation. So we're really trying to promote them over the next year to change the conversation.
So what will they do? They'll use social media to advertise what they're doing because they don't have the college campus, right?
Right.
And so you all come to a meeting if you're interested in doing such and such. And then you just go ahead and then try to do some projects.
Yep, and you know, they're doing volunteer opportunities again to kind of get a sense of what needs to be done in the community. They'll definitely do work around the 2012 election. They're having their own Think 2040 conversations to see how their vision is a little bit different than their counterparts.
So has anybody run for office? Graduates of your place?
Yes, they absolutely have. Actually, one of our founders, Kai Stinchcomb, ran for office in the Palo Alto area. We're seeing people, you know, getting recruited by the White House. 70% of our graduates enter public service. A lot of social entrepreneurs starting nonprofits. I'm excited to be even a part of the network to know those folks.
It's an amazing kind of thing. And were they people who in college were what were they considered in college? I mean, were they sociable?
Right. You know, it's funny. It spans the gamut, you can imagine, because, you know, leaders of the chapter are certainly these sort of charismatic folks, but then, you know, there's a job for everybody to do.
Right.
We need people to research. We need people to organize the campaign. So I would say it really spans the gamut. And the most exciting thing, I think, is that at first it was a lot of political science graduates, you know, econ folks, you can imagine. But now we have a lot of engineers who are joining because they're interested in climate change policy and thinking about alternative energy. A lot of nurses who are coming out, recognizing the situation that our healthcare system's in. You know, a lot of people from...
it's a mix of...
and that's so good for good ideas.
Right.
It really, you know, that cross-pollination helps
So each of these chapters really has its own campaign. I mean, they select their issue. and then they divide it all up, and it's all the different stages, right?
Yeah, like I said, our
they
field
do their
team.
agenda or their positions. They do the position papers, and then they have to get them seen.
Yep, we're asking them to do a lot. So, and like I said, the field staff across the country is so key. And those are all students. Those 40-some people nationwide are students and staffers for us. So it's peer-to-peer.
Are they people who, for instance, would be in UN stuff? And
I think some of them were, but like I said, some of them were sort of engineers and math grads.
And you awakened their interest.
Yeah, I mean, I think people recognize the situation that we're in and that this could be a really pivotal moment. And once you see the successes of other Roosevelt chapters, you know, we have a chapter at Northwestern that does something really incredible. They organized a living wage campaign for their workers on campus, and it created a big stir. Suddenly you have chapters at University of Chicago, at DePaul, other places by non-traditional students who really want to, you know, replicate that kind of impact, to recognize that, sure, I'm 19 years old, but I have the potential to create huge impact. And sort of once they do, then you see them kind of tackling national problems. So you have, you know, Rob Naub, the guy I mentioned earlier, who implemented a piece of the healthcare legislation, and then they grow into pipeline chapters. I mean, hopefully what we do, right, is create a true pipeline, real infrastructure that's long-lasting from college to incubate that intellectual curiosity, that deep civic engagement, all the way up to the Joe Stiglitzes of the world.
So it's not just teaching. It's really experiencing.
Yeah.
What do you call that? Is that a formal kind?
Learning or
Is
something?
that what it's called? I think it must be a different title to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a little bit different than traditional forms of youth engagement that create an agenda. And those are very important to organize people, send out petitions, to, you know, aggregate power. But this is deeper, and it creates a different kind of a citizenry.
Is this more realistic in a way that that Obama's pragmatism can be better understood?
I think so. I mean, one sort of tip, if Barack Obama cared, I would tell him, if I had one shot, I would tell him that OFA was the Organizing for America plan he had originally, was the most compelling and exciting thing that my generation had heard about in a very long time. And if something like that was real and could be instituted, not as an arm of the DNC, but really an organizing body that creates this deep engagement locally.
In a way, it could be you.
In the way, yeah, right.
But it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was mostly sort of a communications tool that went from DC out to the world.
It even lost me.
Right.
And I'm a big Obama supporter and everything else. Right.
Yeah, and
they were telling you. They were sending you points. What do you call them?
Yeah, like talking points. We hoped that OFA would allow Barack Obama to be courageous. Right, because he could hear and have this direct feedback loop to people, regular people across the country, not just loud the Tea Party or
you know,
this
now we're getting it. This happens too often now. I think when I was more active in politics, it was always that I wanted to hear what you said and I'd bring it back.
Right.
But then when I look at the mayoralty election, the way it's run and different commissions that they have, it's not having a commission like the status of women where the women decide, they go out to communities and decide what the issues are. It's what the mayor decides he wants them to consider. Right. That's right. So you've now stopped it and you're reversing it.
Right.
That's very important, I think. Yeah.
I think that
do they know that? Have you had discussions with them?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And you know, this White House Youth Engagement has been trying. They've been posting forums where young people can contribute. But I think this is an opportunity where social media can be helpful. I mean, I'm of the belief that all of this new technology can be harmful in some ways and be helpful. Actually, one of the pipeline fellows we chose, these young people who we chose to promote, are talking about digital citizenship because he basically wants to say we need to own this. We can't just accept whatever comes our way. We need to decide what's good for us and what's bad for us. And in that I mean, there's so much din right now. Like there's so many media outlets. Anybody has a platform to say anything. So that's that's sometimes distracting and disruptive. But similarly, I think it means that you know, the government, that, you know, we as young people have an opportunity to really create a conversation. It doesn't need to be one way. You know, if we use technology well, programs like National Field and others, we can really have a conversation that allows us to put groundbreaking ideas into the process, that allows politicians to be courageous and really change the country.
I'm just really so if somebody was to contribute, you don't take individual contribute. I mean, you're not a tax exempt because
we are tax exempt.
So how do you separate the politics then?
So we just create ideas. We don't endorse candidates.
I see.
So students, create ideas and put them out there. We publish journals, and we're happy when people implement them, but we don't actively lobby.
And you're the ones who will tell
Right.
and everything.
We are 501c3.
So you don't lobby in Washington or
no,
in state?
we don't actively lobby. Like I said, we testify. We do a lot of social media.
Right.
We do video. We do everything that we can, but we aren't 501c4.
So then the other organizations that do the lobbying frequently consult with you?
That's why it's so nice to have partner organizations. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to have other youth orgs that have C4s that want to represent a youth perspective, people to come to us as being the ones that generated the ideas. So we definitely are very happy to work in coalition with other people.
It's an amazing kind of thing. Have you developed lots of friends this way?
Oh yes, so many friends, both at the local level, the state level, the national level. It's really wonderful to touch all those levels of government.
And do people take on projects for the media, for instance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in some cases, like Wisconsin, for example, when that happened, we really had students try and create video content to get people's attention. Right. They showed up in droves in Wisconsin. They showed up with plans in their hand so that it wasn't just breaking up a rally, but implement this solution that we have right here. So we've definitely seen them, be responsive to that. And like I said, Think 2040 was responsive to the media in some ways, since the media was propagating this narrative that we can make all these crazy
I mean,
cuts.
do you have anybody working on what the media should be like?
Oh, certainly. That is a huge topic of interest for young people.
Are saving newspapers of any interest?
Yeah, definitely. We talk about that a lot. I mean, that's part of this digital citizenship in some ways, this idea that you can't just accept all the technology that comes. You need to decide what's good for you and what's bad for you. So we have that campaign going on across the country. And actually one thing that we're doing to try and do some media work is we hired communications folks across the country, students who are communicating our students' ideas and getting that experience and trying to sort of mentor the behavior that they want, or sort of show it by example the behavior that they would like the media to engage in.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So if somebody really wanted to participate, if they were on a college campus that doesn't have a chapter, what do they do? So
you go to RooseveltCampusNetwork.org. There's a huge Join Us button and a little bit smaller Donate Here button, but they're both there. And you can click Join a Chapter. It will show you where all our chapters are across the country, give you contact information.
Where are the chapters in New York?
So we have chapters at City College, at NYU, at Columbia, at Hunter, at Queens. There's a bunch, and some upstate as well.
And they can find that out by looking at the website.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much. This has been so interesting and so encouraging and so hopeful, because we know maybe that we'll have some really stupendous public officials.
Yeah, we hope so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.